2024년도
In this year of 2024, we are upon the final Lord's Day service before our Father. Today, as the New Jerusalem Choir had sang, within my life, this is hymn 470, as we look upon the heavens and the songs of praise from the choir, we receive grace and our hearts understand the peace given by our God. And now, as we come to 2024, there's only 2 days left. As we live each and every day, we experience yet another year going by. And what goes on? What do you think about in your heart? Do you feel as if the world is going slow or quick? It's probably going quick, right? The people of the world, they say that the world is time, it flies, right? Or it goes as if a very quick stream. But Moses in Psalm chapter 90, verse 10, he says, our days of our life is 70, or if due strength, 80 years. And all of that, it is filled with labor and sorrow. And soon it is gone and we fly away. Flies away like an arrow shot from a bow. Our nation, we are most known for archery. And the arrow, it travels about 67 kilometers per second. As soon as it's released from the bow, almost 70 kilometers per hour. And so our life, it passes by just as quickly. Each year, as we come to the end, we look forward to the new year, right? And our entire life, someday, there is an end. And there's a time in which we must give our evaluation or our settlement before God. And we need to prepare for our new life that will take place in the kingdom of heaven. Today, as we go about this settlement, we are filled with the hope of the kingdom of heaven. The worldly people, they settle their accounts with money. At the end of the year, they calculate how much profits or how much minus that they might have. They say, oh, we have this much left over, plus, or this much in debt. It's a minus. But God, He requires for us to come to a settlement with faith. If you look in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, it says that without faith, it is impossible to please Him. Those who go before God, they must believe that God exists and He is a rewarder of those who seek Him. Loving saints, today, as we embark upon the Lord's Day, the final Lord's Day of 2024, with faith, we must look back upon this year and come to a settlement or an account settlement in this year. Firstly, we must evaluate whether our faith is a living faith. For a year, have I lived this year with a living faith, or have I lived with a dead faith? Firstly, one day the disciples, they ask Jesus, and they say, Jesus, Lord, please increase our faith. Increase our faith. This is in Luke chapter 17, verse 5. When you look at this word, you think, the disciples, it seems as if they want a greater faith. The disciples are very good in thinking this way. We might think this, right? But if you actually examine it, you actually find that there is a misunderstanding of the disciples. What are the disciples going through right now? They're thinking, for me, I have a certain amount of faith. I have a certain amount. But on top of that, I want to add more. I want to increase what faith that I already have. That's what they're thinking. If you look at the original Greek, the word increase is prostithemi. And this word means to place more on top of what is already existing. For example, if you have 3 rice cakes, you add 2 more, then you'll have 5 rice cakes. You're adding to what you already have. But you and I, before we think to ourselves, I have a certain amount of faith, we must ask the question, do I have any faith? And if I do have any sort of faith, is it so minuscule to the point that it is non-existent? As we come to the end of the year every year, Senior Pastor Abraham Park, I miss him so dearly every time I approach the end. Every time at the end of the year, he's always say, repent. He'd scream this to us. And then he'd awaken our slumbering souls. But at least in that way, as he scolds us and punishes us, he directs us onto the right path. And because we had such a person, we had the ability to live a life of faith in the right way. But now we don't really have that. And yet still, even though that might seem like a good thing, we're unable to come to our senses, and with our own thoughts, we go upon whatever path that we determine. Senior Pastor, in his words, he would say, you fool, you don't even have a single amount of faith. This is sometimes what he would say. And when I think that, or when I hear that, I'd come to my senses. Oh, wow, I really don't have any faith. And then you'd awaken, you'd come to your senses. If you look at 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5, it says, test yourselves to see if you are in the faith. Examine yourselves. Do you not recognize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail the test? Today, you and I, before we ask and make the request of increasing our faith, we must examine ourselves to see if we have any faith at all. And so in this question and request that the disciples make, how did Jesus reply? Jesus, he told his disciples that they must have faith as small, like a mustard seed. This is in Luke chapter 17, verse 6. And the Lord said, if you had faith like a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and be planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Here, we can see the differing views of faith between the disciples and Jesus. The disciples, the view of faith was focused on increasing the amount. They were pursuing a quantitative measure of faith. But Jesus, his view on faith, was whether if that faith was alive or dead. Jesus was emphasizing the vitality of faith. The vitality was what is more important. This mustard seed, it's only 1 to 2 millimeters in size. It's like a grain of rice. But that small seed, if it is planted, later on it becomes a huge tree that grows up to 5 meters. A seed that is only 1 to 2 millimeters in size. How can that become a tree that is up to 5 meters? And the reason is because within that seed, there is life. That's why Jesus, he says, hey, don't ask me to increase your faith. Rather, before that, you need to examine yourselves to see if you have a living faith. You need to see if your faith is alive or dead first. Thirdly, a living faith is a faith that is accompanied by works. James chapter 2 verse 26, just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. A living faith is one that is expressed through actions, through works. This is what Jesus is saying. You know, we go to the gates of the church to pray, all of our saints. That's a living faith, is it not? If your faith was dead, how can you go out? Whether it rains, whether it snows, whether it's windy. And even during the burning heat during the summer, and even during the coldest winters where it's minus 15 degrees Celsius, doesn't matter. We always go out to the gate to pray. That is a living faith. And even though we're chased out of the church and persecuted, you know, the people at the gate, they always say that, oh, hey, the church needs to become one. The gates are opened, and once it's safe, then we'll go and worship. Some people think this way. But every week we gather here at Ojongdong Prayer Center and we're able to worship our Father. That in and of itself, that gathering is an image of living faith. A living faith is a faith that works through actions. James chapter 2 verse 22, the faith was working with his works, and as a result of the works, faith was perfected. God's saying, if your faith is alive, then without changing, your works would be evident. But we humans, how are we? You know, sometimes we have kind of vacations, right? This week, I'm going to take a break. You know, they take a vacation. This week, I don't want to go to church. This week, I'm just going to take a hiatus. But, you know, even that, as you do it once or twice, it feels good. And so 1 week becomes 1 month, 1 month becomes 3 months, and so that vacation becomes longer and longer. And very often we find ourselves skipping church. That kind of a faith, in an instant, that kind of a faith is a dead faith. Beloved saints, in this year of 2024, have I taken that vacation? And perhaps in an instant, has my faith died? Today, as we give the final service of this year and we come to an account settlement, in the year of 2025, may we not take these spiritual vacations. Today at 9 a.m., I went to the Kaebongdong Center, and for the children, middle school and elementary, I did the service. And there's a child. There's about 8 children that for 6 years They've never missed a day of school from grade 1 all the way to 6. There's about 8 of them that have perfect attendance. And so as I saw that, I was so happy, and then I kind of applauded automatically. And so today, as we come to an account settlement, let us think deeply. And until the day we enter into heaven, may we not take these vacations or breaks, but until the day we get to heaven, each and every day on Lord's Day, may we not be absent of any service. And I bless you in the name of the Lord. Main point number 2. We must evaluate whether our works were driven by a desire for a reward. As I work, do I desire a reward? Firstly, Jesus, he connects faith with works. In Luke chapter 17, verse 5, the disciples ask Jesus to increase our faith. And in Luke chapter 17, verse 6, Jesus says, if you had faith like a mustard seed, a living faith like a mustard seed, and you tell the mulberry tree to be planted into the sea. And then, all of a sudden, Jesus kind of changes the subject, and from Luke chapter 17, verse 7 to 10, he speaks about a servile servant, a working servant. If we have a living faith, then we too need to have this image of working in our life of faith. Luke chapter 17, verse 9 to 10, that word do in Greek is poieo, and 4 times it appears. Luke chapter 17, verse 9, he did. Luke chapter 17, verse 10, you do or have done twice. 4 times this poieo is used. So if that's the case, then what are the works of a servant with a living faith? What do they do? Firstly, they never complain, even amidst constant work. In Jesus' parable, he talks about the servile servant, the working servant. And this servant works all day in the field. And not only that, he plows, but he even tends the sheep. This is in Luke chapter 17, verse 7. All day he works. He plows the field, he tends the sheep. And so imagine how tired he must be. And yet, as soon as he goes into the house, he doesn't rest, but he has to prepare the meal for the master. And so for the master, he prepares the meal. And then after that, the master eats and drinks. And once that is finished, then the servant is able to eat and drink. Luke chapter 17, verse 8. But will he not say to him, prepare something for me to eat, and properly clothe yourself and serve me while I eat and drink? And afterward, you may eat and drink. But the amazing thing is that even though the servant had so many things to do, within the lips of this servant, not even one complaint, not even one grumbling comes out. That's the kind of servant that the Lord acknowledges as one with a living faith. In my heart, even if just a little bit, I have a little bit of grumbling, then my faith is dying. All day, plowing the field, tending the sheep, and now he's telling me to prepare the meal. Does that make any sort of sense? We might think that way, right? But none of that comes forth from the working servant's lips. Secondly, we must not expect a reward, no matter how much work we have accomplished. Luke chapter 17, verse 9. He does not thank the slave because he did the things which were commanded, does he? This word thank in Greek is charis. It means grace, gift, or gratitude. And so, this servant, all day he's plowing and tending the sheep. And after that, he has to prepare the meal and the drink for the master. And from that servant, he doesn't expect a thank you from the master. Luke chapter 17, verse 9, in the New Living Translation, it says, "And does the master thank the servant for doing what he was told to do? Of course not." And in Luke chapter 17, verse 9, the NIV version, it says, "Will he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do?" Not even a single thank you. A living faith, no matter how much work they accomplish, they don't expect any reward, praise, or compensation. That's the kind of faith a living faith is. Why? I did so much work, but that's not me doing it. It is God giving me the grace to enable me to do those works. It is by God's grace alone. Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10, he says, "But by the grace of God I am what I am. And his grace toward me did not prove vain. But I labored even more than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God with me." It's God's grace that Apostle Paul is confessing. Beloved saints, in this year of 2024, we've all had our own tasks that God has given to us. We're a lot less busy. We're a lot more busy than when we were inside the church. But because of that, we might think, why do I have so many things to do? If there was an instant where we felt such a complaint or grumbling, or perhaps we might think, I've spent so many sleepless nights doing this work. I've sweat so much sweat. I've worked so hard. And yet there's no one that acknowledges me. No one has given me any money as a reward. If we have thought this way, that moment is a time in which my faith is dead. That is a dead faith. Beloved saints, now, as we come to a conclusion of this year, the year 2024, was my faith a dead faith? All the things that I've done, has complaints or grumbling been within my heart? Sometimes, maybe perhaps I sought thanksgiving or I sought acknowledgement. We must examine ourselves. In that way, we're able to recover the living faith that our Father wants us to have. And we're able to make the confession that everything is by God's grace. And I bless you in the name of the Lord. In conclusion, with a living faith, we must always realize that we are unworthy servants. Jesus said, if you have a living faith, in Luke chapter 17, verse 10, you must make this confession. Luke chapter 17, verse 10, when you look at it, it says, so you too, when you do all the things which are commanded you, say, we are unworthy slaves. We have done only that which we ought to have done. This is a commandment. Those with a living faith, firstly, they do all that is commanded. Luke chapter 17, verse 10. Do all the things which are commanded you. We didn't even do everything that was given to us. Maybe we did maybe half, maybe we did 60%. But even then, our lips get pouted. Look at this servant. He did everything that was commanded him. And even then, he was not proud or arrogant. We do 50%, we do 60%, and already we think we've done all that. So that's why now we need to look back and see if we had a living faith or not. Jesus, on the cross, his hands and his feet were pierced with nails. His whole body was covered with blood. And yet, as we see in John chapter 19, verse 30, he says that it is finished. Until the very last breath of his life, he has done all the commands that the Father God had given to him. Within the suffering of the cross, even amidst that state, Jesus completed all of redemptive history. Secondly, we must confess that we are unworthy slaves. Think about if you completed all your tasks. Everyone praises you. Oh, there's no one except elders. There's no one except you, elder. Everyone praises you. How did you do this? And at that moment, even though I'm unknowing, I feel good. Oh, of course, yeah, I am quite good. If I'm not here, it probably wouldn't have gone as smoothly. Give someone else the task. It's not going to work. We think this way, and so very subtly we kind of praise ourselves. But look at this servant. The Father had commanded that servant to do it, and he did all of that. And after he had done all that, what does he say? He says, I am an unworthy slave. I'm worthless. I'm useless. Now, of course, clearly this is a useful slave. But the slave, the servant himself, confesses that he is worthless. He's thinking to himself, he is unworthy to do these works that have been commanded of him. He's useless to do these things. And yet, God is using me. And because of that usingness, he is so thankful. I'm unworthy and of no use. This is the kind of confession that this servant makes. Even after completing many works, a living faith will never become proud or arrogant. But it is teaching us that we must have this constant state of humility. The moment that I complete a task and the moment I feel complete and fulfilled, that living faith is lost. Thirdly, we must confess that we have done only that which we ought to have done. Luke chapter 17, verse 10, it says, we have done only that which we ought to have done. The things that I did, it's not because of any reward, it's not because of any praise or gratitude, but it's because they are the things that I had to do. Beloved saints, we were headed in the direction of hell. We are at the doorstep of never-ending fire and brimstone because of sin, and it was filling the earth and ourselves. But Jesus came to this world, and in my place, he took my sins on the cross, and in that, he has made us into the righteous. and He has allowed us to enter into the kingdom of heaven. How thankful are we with this? When you think about the grace that the Lord has given to us, then it doesn't matter if we plow the fields all day or tend the sheep, and it doesn't matter even I have to prepare the meal of the glorious Master. We are so thankful. A worthless servant such as I, the fact that I'm being used, I'm so thankful. And so I just did what I ought to have done. This is the kind of confession that must take over all of us from head to toe, all the things that we do. And when that takes place, then that person's faith becomes a living faith. Beloved saints, as we come to a settlement of accounts today, let us ask ourselves if we had a living faith or a dead faith. At this time, we must be self-aware. Today, if but just a little bit, I've had a complaint or a grumbling of all the tasks given to me, or perhaps there hasn't been a single person that acknowledged me, there hasn't been a single reward or gratitude or praise. We must look upon ourselves. And at this time, it must no longer be a dead faith, but it must be a living faith that the Father would acknowledge, the faith that allows me to enter into heaven, the faith that allows me to realize that I have just been used by God. That kind of a confession must sincerely come from our hearts and from our lips. Thanksgiving and joy must be never ending. That kind of living faith, I bless you in the name of the Lord, that it will glorify our Father God. At this time,